In the last section, we had a discussion on Flexbox. In particular, the two properties justify content and align items. These two properties can be applied to a container styling, and it will cause any elements within the container to be positioned in a certain fashion. So again, we're going to be applying the justify content and the align items properties to the view tag. That's going to cause our text tag to move around on the screen. So let's fix up our view style here. We're going to add on a couple more properties. First, because we want to center the text tag on the screen, we will use justify content of center to move it halfway down the view tag, and then align items center to move it halfway across the view tag. I'm also going to apply a set height of 60 and a padding top to it at the same time. I'm going to make sure I got all my commas in there as well. So height behaves just as you would expect. We can pass it a pixel value and we will get 60 pixels on the screen. And padding top behaves just the same way as it does on CSS as well. It'll add a padding to the top of the element. So I'm going to save this, and let's check out how the header looks now. All right, definitely big improvement. It's not inside the network tag anymore. We've got it nicely centered beneath the networking bar. So this doesn't look half bad. Now the next thing I want to do with this header component is make sure we kind of get a bottom border here as well. Again, the video doesn't quite convey it, I'm sure, but there's kind of this subtle off-white or kind of gray looking color to the header. And by adding on a bottom border of sorts, it'll kind of just add to distinguish between the header and any other content that we have on the screen. So let's walk through adding on a couple more properties to this view style tag. Rather than giving just a solid border color, like just a border or a straight line, we'll use a shadow property. So a shadow property is going to make it appear that there's kind of shadowing at the bottom of the header. To add on a shadow, we use a couple of different properties. First, we'll specify a shadow color. This will say, hey, I want there to be a shadow on this element. Please use this color. And we'll say, just use black. Next, we'll define a shadow offset. A shadow offset is what actually tells the element, hey, here's exactly the dimensions of the shadow, or how tall or how wide it should be. We want a width of 0, so there will be no shadowing on the left or the right-hand side, but there will be a height to it, so vertical, of 2 pixels. And finally, we'll give it a shadow opacity of 0.2. Shadow opacity right here is kind of the darkness of the shadow, or how heavy it is. So let's now check this out inside of the browser, simulator. And now, okay, this is looking pretty good. We've got a nice shadow on here as well. You can play around with these properties a whole bunch. So maybe I'll give it like a height of 20. And now it really extends up and down. That's definitely way too much. So I'll go back to 2. I can also play around with the opacity as well. So I can go all the way up to say like 0.9. It's a number that ranges between 1 and 0. So at 9 it starts to get really dark. You could go all the way down to like say 0.5. That starts to look pretty reasonable as well. But I'm going to run with just the default of 0.2. If you want to use something darker, you certainly can. It's totally up to you. Now there's 2 final properties I want to place on this view style. They're not going to be super relevant right now, but they will be relevant later on. And certainly we will come back to the header component and discuss why we're placing them here. But we're just going to kind of do it right now and just kind of accept it and then talk about why they're here later on. So I'm also going to add on the property elevation of 2 and a position of relative. Again, we're going to come back and discuss these properties. We'll deal with it later on. All right, let's give one last look at our component here. It's looking pretty darn good. This is a great start for our application. Let's continue with the rest of our app in the next section.